In this Moringa video, we'll talk about taking the Moringa plant from seed to pot and then ultimately planting it into the ground. To start, we're looking at a clip of the Moringas growing about maybe 6 months old, and this was how they started out. I essentially put a bunch of seeds down into a pot, and as many of them as I could grow and keep, I was happy with. Oftentimes, after a couple months, if you don't water them correctly, they will die, and it's hard to recover at that stage. But once they get to this point, they're pretty sturdy, and it's pretty easy to keep them. Even if they don't get watered frequently, they will respawn and stay alive. So this is 1 year later, and I've kept them in the same pot. I wanted, first of all, it was a test to see how they were going to do throughout the winter here in Southern California, and they responded just fine. They lost their leaves during the winter, and just became sticks, and then ultimately regrew and added a little more sturdiness to their stems. So you can see that their bases are they're all tied together, and ultimately I knew that I wasn't going to keep them in that pot for the long haul. It was sort of just a test to see if I can grow as many as I can in one spot, and then ultimately the goal is to separate them and see if I can have each of them survive. So now the task is to ultimately separate these individual plants. There are about 6 of them in there. So what my task is I'm going to fill up the bucket, and I put a pan underneath that I can fill up with water. Ultimately, I'm trying to really hydrate and soak the plants as much as I can so that they're loaded with water, because during this transfer process they are going to be taxed a little bit, and so I don't want them straining for water. And this is sort of the recommended approach for many plants. I'm not sure, to be honest, if this is the best approach for Moringa, but it was what I've done in the past in other plants, so I decided to go ahead with this approach as well. So it's a learning experience. So what I'm going to do here is ultimately water these guys down, let the water soak in for a little bit, and then I'm going to separate the plants from each other and also from the soil, clean them out, and resituate them in their new homes. Considering that these Moringa trees are over a year old, they are extremely small, and it's sort of a testament to 2 things about the Moringa tree. One, that they just are amazing surviving plants once they get past a first certain stage, that even though there's 6 of them stuck together in this tiny little pot with not a whole lot of soil to work with, that all of them seem to be surviving okay. So it's a testament to that. 2, it shows you the opposite fact, that if they don't have room to grow, and if they aren't provided with enough space to really expand their root structure, that they won't really grow that big, that they're sort of limited and constrained by their soil. So that's nothing amazing. It's pretty obvious. So what will be amazing is to find out how these guys flourish now, 1 year later, hoping that they've got their sturdiness all built up. So what I'm doing here is I'm releasing them from the pot. Again, I'm not a professional at this, so I'm sure there's better methods for this that other people have developed over time. I'm just doing a way that works. So essentially, after letting them sit for a few hours and letting them get hydrated, I loosened the soil in the box, in the pot, and just shook them out. And then ultimately what I'm going to do is I'm going to separate the soil from the root ball. And if you haven't seen a moringa root before, especially one that's been grown from seed, which all of these have been grown from seed, this is a great opportunity to see what it looks like. And the reason that it's important to know what the root structure of the moringa looks like, because it will define the way you should be watering these guys. Should you be watering them shallow and wide, or should you be watering them maybe deeper and less frequently? And so what we're going to find out here as we go ahead and separate some of these moringa plants is what the root structure looks like. If there are lots of small little roots and they're sort of sticking out to the sides, then you can expect that you want to shallow frequently, and you want to you want to water frequently, and you want to water shallowly. But what I've been told, and we'll find out for sure in just a minute, is that the moringa tree has what's known as a taproot. And if you're not familiar with gardening, that essentially means that there's one major thick main root that goes straight down from the seed. And right from the beginning, you'll notice that when a seed gets germinated, that it will have this one main taproot that it sticks down, and then it starts drinking from there. But as I pull out, so you can see there's a few small seeds there. It's not too deep, but that's the smallest plant, and I'm actually surprised that one even survived. But the other ones, I'm going to pull out now one of the bigger ones, and you can get a good sense of what the root structure looks like from this guy that I'm going to pull out. Ultimately, they have one major source of drinking, and it looks almost like you would see at a potato almost. It's just this really thick ball of a root, and that's the taproot. And that, as long as that guy is getting a decent connection to a water source, you're going to see your tree flourish, and it will grow. You see that seed that looks like it just expanded and it sent out that one main root straight down. And in proper planting conditions, that main taproot will go straight down. And if it's been watered properly, that taproot will go straight down, and it won't really seek out to the side. You want it to go straight down, because that's how these trees last longer and longer. So I've seen online that these moringa trees are surprisingly, once they get to this state, they're pretty sturdy to work with, meaning that I could mess with it and take the root and clean it off like I'm doing right now, separate it, and I should be able to replant it, and these moringas will still regrow and flourish. They may, for the short period, they may lose their leaves and die back a little bit, but my understanding is that the moringa tree, its life force comes from the root, and as long as that root is still moist and it's still in healthy condition, you can cut the top off as much as you like, and it's still going to regrow. Ultimately, any plant wants to survive, and that's the interesting part about gardening, is that it doesn't matter what type of plant it is, that it's always, all plants are trying to survive. And occasionally, even if you cut back a tree all the way to its stump, you'll see that it sticks out shoots and starts to try and regrow. And ultimately, it's just life trying to survive. So what I'm doing here is I'm taking 3 of these moringa trees that I've separated that were started from seed, and I'm going to plant them into another spot that I've created for them right up near the fence. Ultimately, they're just going to be in the sun for a decent amount of time, and I wanted to get, I don't have a whole lot of space to grow moringas, so I Figured out one little spot here by the fence that would work well. I have a planter box right behind it that I was growing regular vegetables, and so I decided to switch to growing smaller moringas just behind the fence. I found that proper nutrients in the soil is definitely important for growing your moringa and seeing it really take off. So you'll want to make sure that you'll have, for me, I'm not using any fancy food for them other than I just buy some nice organic mix of garden soil, and I added some perlite. You'll see those floating white things that I had in the water, and there's little white pieces there in the flower bed as well, and that's essentially just to lighten up the soil. I don't think it's required, but if you do have a way of making your soil a little bit looser, that is a good recommendation. I took a moment to add reinforcement to this particular moringa that I already saw that it was going to have trouble and start leaning to the side. So I just happened to have a tomato plant. I don't know what they're called, but these little cages. And I just added it around this moringa tree. And so finally I'll just plant the last moringa tree over here to the side. And in this video I'm just giving you a quick update as to what I'm doing. I'll be doing a follow-up video in a few weeks to show more clearly this process. So it's going to take you from separating your moringa trees that have been growing in pots to planting them, and then ultimately showing you, how they're probably going to die back for a few days and then regrow, and then ultimately after hopefully a few more months come back with enough vigor that they'll be prepared for the winter time. So that's it for this particular episode, and we shall see you in the next time.